So this is September 3rd, Saturday, September 3rd, and this is the evening session beginning at 7 p.m. Okay, so where we left off last time, we left off with the attainment of the first jhana and the mastery over the first jhana through the 5 kinds of mastery. And now what remains in what the Abhidhamma Sangaha calls the Gochara Bheda, the analysis of the terrain, is to go through a brief analysis of the jhanas, both according to the Sutta scheme and then take a brief look at the Abhidhamma scheme. Okay, so in the Sutta scheme, we have 4 jhanas, and the first jhana is described in the suttas by this formula: secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states of mind, one enters and dwells in the first jhana, which contains or consists of rapture and happiness born of seclusion, accompanied by applied thought and sustained thought, or initial application and sustained application. And so we can see here that a number of factors are mentioned, which already the suttas pull out these factors and describe them as the 5 jhana factors. So we have applied thought, sustained thought, rapture, happiness, which means pleasant feeling, and then one factor which is not expressly mentioned but is essential to any state of concentration, and that is one-pointedness of mind. Okay, now the procedure for progressing from a lower jhana to a higher jhana, according to the method of the commentaries, is to reflect on the drawback or defect in the lower jhana, and then to reflect on the greater virtue or the greater excellence in the higher jhana. So compared to our ordinary state of mind, a jhana, even the first jhana, is wonderful, magnificent, sublime, stupendous, glorious. But once the meditator attains the first jhana, achieves mastery of it, perhaps that meditator will then go to develop insight, and then will just continue along the track of insight. But suppose the meditator is one who aspires to master all the different possible dimensions of consciousness, going from the first jhana all the ways up to the highest formless or immaterial jhana. So this meditator, after mastering the first jhana, will then reflect that this first jhana, as magnificent as it is compared to our day-to-day consciousness, is still defective. And it's defective because it contains vitakka and vichara, applied thought and sustained thought, which are relatively gross factors. So now the mind, you could say, in the first jhana, it's like our ordinary mind is like a lake which is stirred up constantly by strong winds, and so there are large waves rising and falling. But now in the first jhana, we could say the mind is now like a still pool, except that there's a breeze which blows from time to time and creates little riplets along the surface of the lake. Those little riplets, those are like applied thought and sustained thought. And we want to make that lake perfectly smooth, perfectly calm. And so one sees that applied thought and sustained thought are relatively gross. And since one is acquainted with the Buddha's teaching on the jhanas, one knows that above the first jhana there is another state of samadhi in which applied thought and sustained thought are eliminated. A state which is more peaceful, more sublime than the first jhana. And so one then, having examined the defects in the first jhana, the greater peacefulness and more sublime nature of the second jhana, one goes back to one's meditation object, continues to focus on it, aspiring to reach the second jhana. And when all conditions are mature, when one's faculties are strong enough, if one's faculties become strong enough, then at a certain point, applied thought and sustained thought will fall away, and one enters and dwells in the second jhana. And this is described as having internal placidity or peacefulness and unification of mind, and it contains rapture and happiness born of concentration. In the first jhana, rapture and happiness are said to be born of seclusion, because the mind has become secluded from sense pleasures and unwholesome states. But now the mind has become more strongly concentrated, more strongly or clearly collected. And so here the rapture and happiness are said to be born of concentration and without applied and sustained thought. So from the Abhidhammic point of view, looking at the second jhana, though several other factors are mentioned, but the Abhidhamma just draws out 3 factors and says that these 3 are the jhana factors. So these jhana factors are rapture or joy, that's piti, happiness, which is pleasant feeling, and one-pointedness of mind. And so again, one proceeds, after attaining the second jhana, one attains it again and again until one becomes thoroughly familiar with it. Then one exercises mastery over it so one could enter it whenever one wants, remain for long periods of time, and then emerge very promptly without any disorientation. And so once one achieves that mastery of the second jhana, over the second jhana, if one aspires to go further, then one looks back at the second jhana and thinks, that's the most wonderful, most mind-blowing state that I've ever experienced, except there's a little drawback there, which is rapture, piti. Because rapture, or this joy, it has a kind of bubbly quality to it. Maybe if we go back to our simile of the lake, so there's no longer a wind blowing across the surface of the lake, but maybe there are fish and turtles below which occasionally they come close to the surface and they cause little ripples on the lake. So this is like rapture. There's an element of excitement or exhilaration in rapture, which creates, we can't quite call it in conventional terms a disturbance, but from the jhanic point of view, we could say that rapture is a disturbing element. And so one knows that there is a state of concentration, a jhana above the second jhana, which is more peaceful, more sublime, more excellent, and one forms the strong determination to achieve that jhana. And so one returns to one's practice, developing, strengthening one's mental faculties, and at a certain point, when all of the faculties and prerequisites come together, rapture fades away, and one then enters and dwells in the third jhana, which is described thus, that one dwells equanimous, that is now equanimity, not the Brahmavihara, but just equanimity as balance of mind becomes more prominent. And of course, mindfulness and clear comprehension are present through all the jhanas, but now, because rapture has faded away, now mindfulness and clear comprehension become more prominent, and so they are mentioned as distinct factors. And one is still experiencing happiness or pleasant feeling. And so one enters and dwells in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare that equanimous and mindful one dwells happily. And so you could see in the Sutta formula that in the Sutta formula for the third jhana, various factors are mentioned like equanimity, mindfulness, and clear comprehension. But working solely with the scheme of jhana factors, the Abhidhamma philosophers single out in the third jhana two defining factors of that jhana, the two specific jhana factors, that is the happiness or pleasant feeling and the one-pointedness of mind. Okay, again, one goes through the same process of becoming thoroughly familiar with the third jhana, exercising mastery over it, and then one considers that this third jhana, as blissful as it is still marred by this factor of, we don't want to say happiness here, but pleasant feeling. Of course, we all want happiness, but the question is what constitutes happiness? But this is not so much a matter of happiness versus sadness, but the tone of feeling in the experience. And the feeling here is pleasant feeling. This is the most sublime kind of pleasant feeling that one can experience. Let's say the most sublime kind of mundane, pleasant feeling that one could experience. But pleasant feeling is a kind of bait. It's the bait for attachment or clinging. And so even underneath this third jhana, there can be a subtle clinging to that pleasant feeling. And if one surrenders to that clinging, then it can set in motion that whole process of karmic accumulation that is just going to perpetuate the continuity of birth and death, samsara. And one knows that beyond the third jhana, there is a higher jhana, which is more sublime, more peaceful. And the reason it's more peaceful is because in that jhana, pleasant feeling has faded away and been replaced by another kind of feeling, which is called the feeling that is neither painful nor pleasant, or more simply, neutral feeling. So one goes through the regular procedure, directs one's mind to the meditation object, and then when all conditions come together, when one's faculties are mature enough, then that lingering pleasant feeling drops away. And so the jhanic formula goes with the abandoning of pleasure and pain, and with the previous passing away of joy and dejection. Actually, all of these other three feelings had previously been overcome, but just to show that in the fourth jhana, none of those feelings, except neither painful nor pleasant, is present, the formula mentions all the other feelings that are abandoned. And so one abandons those other feelings and enters and dwells in the fourth jhana, which is described as neither painful nor pleasant, and which has purification of mindfulness by equanimity. Now, in this fourth jhana, the equanimity has become, it's sort of reached its fullness, and with that fullness of equanimity, then mindfulness has become fully purified. And so the fourth jhana is described as having two factors: the neither painful nor pleasant feeling and the one-pointedness of mind. Okay, before we go to the formless or immaterial meditations, I just want to show how in the Abhidhamma system, instead of 4 jhanas, one arrives at 5 jhanas. And we could see that if we go back to the first jhana here. Actually, I have the formula repeated again. Okay, the first jhana is the same, and you could see that the first jhana is accompanied by applied thought and sustained thought. Now, in the Sutta method, to pass to the second jhana, at one shot, one overcomes applied thought and sustained thought. But those are distinct mental factors, and so a meditator who's a little bit sluggish, compared to the really swift swans among the meditators, a little bit sluggish will, instead of eliminating applied thought and sustained thought simultaneously, will succeed in eliminating only applied thought, and so enters a second jhana, which is without applied thought, but with sustained thought only. And so then, this second jhana will have 4 factors: sustained thought, rapture, pleasant feeling, and one-pointedness of mind. And then when this meditator goes further and drops the sustained thought, then they will enter the third jhana of the Abhidhamma scheme, which is exactly the same as the second jhana of the Sutta scheme. And then the fourth jhana of the Abhidhamma scheme is the same as the third jhana of the Sutta scheme. And the fifth jhana of the Abhidhamma scheme corresponds to the fourth jhana of the Sutta scheme. Okay, but let us, even though this is an Abhidhamma seminar or symposium or discuss or retreat, but let us think within the framework of the Sutta system. Okay, so now we're going to see how the meditator passes from the 4 jhanas to go to the next domain of experience, which is that of the formless or immaterial meditations. So we could say that the 4 jhanas constitute like one domain of experience. They're distinguished by levels, 1, 2, 3, 4, levels of subtlety, levels of peacefulness, but all 4 of them pertain to what is called the fine material sphere, or the form sphere of existence, because they take as their object that visualized counterpart sign, which is a very subtle kind of form. But when we come to the immaterial attainments, you go up to the 4th jhana, and then one comes to a kind of ceiling that one has to break through. And that ceiling is a subtle attachment to form. And so there's a procedure for breaking through that attachment to form, and that is to consider, one reflects first on the dangers or the drawbacks in material form, and in that way one becomes indifferent to the kasina object. And so one enters into the fourth jhana, one achieves mastery over it in the 5 ways. Then, on emerging from the fourth jhana, one sees the danger or drawback in that jhana in this way, that it's still involved with some kind of perceived form, that it's close to joy or rapture, which can subtly undermine that peacefulness of the jhana. And even the fourth jhana is grosser than the peaceful liberations. Okay, so one sees the danger or the drawback in that fourth jhana in this way, and thereby one ends one's attachment to it. Then one gives attention to the base of boundless space as peaceful. Okay, then one takes the kasina. Now this is the actual procedure for gaining the base of infinite space. One takes the kasina, or the counterpart sign of the kasina, that nimitta, the patibhaga nimitta, and one extends it, expands it, till it covers a larger and larger area, until in one's imagination or one's visual field, one's visually field, the kasina is spread out, covering the entire cosmos or world sphere. So the visualized form is extended over the entire universe, and now instead of attending to the form itself, the colored form of the kasina, one gives attention only to the space occupied by it, considering that as space, or as boundless space. And so the text says, he simply does not advert to it, that is to the kasina, or give attention to it or review it, but he gives his attention exclusively to the space occupied by it, regarding that as space. And then he turns the mind again and again to the sign of the space left by the removal of the kasina, considering it as space, and striking at it with applied and it should be applied and sustained thought. Okay, as one does so, when all of the faculties are mature enough, then the hindrances subside. I mean, they're already suppressed by the jhanas, but they're kept in a state of suspension. Mindfulness is established, and the mind becomes concentrated in access concentration. One cultivates that access state again and again, and then, following the access, the consciousness belonging to the base, consisting of boundless space, arises in absorption with that infinite space or boundless space as its object. Then the text compares this to a man who has plugged an opening in a pot with a piece of blue, red, yellow, or white cloth, and is looking at it, and then when the cloth is removed, he finds himself looking only at the space it occupied. And so in this way, when it's first looking at the kasina, or the counterpart sign of the kasina, and then one attends only to the space, not to the sign itself, and that is called removing the counterpart sign, removing the kasina. And when that happens, then one takes as object the boundless space that the kasina was occupying. And the mind goes into the meditative attainment of boundless space. Then, to go to the higher formless meditations, one proceeds in the same way as with the jhanas. I don't have to go in detail through each one. But one considers first that the base of infinite space, as peaceful and sublime as it is still relatively coarse. Beyond that is the base of infinite consciousness. Then after one masters the base of infinite consciousness, one considers that its object is relatively coarse. Beyond that is a higher attainment called the base of nothingness, or I would say better, non-obstructiveness. One attains that, masters it, and then one goes to the fourth formless meditation called the base of neither perception nor non-perception, which is so called because in that attainment, the faculty or the mental factor of perception has become so subtle that it no longer exercises the normal function of perception. And yet it's not the case that perception is totally absent. There is perception there, but it's at its utmost level of subtlety. And so it's called neither perception, because normal perception is not there, nor non-perception, because perception is not absent. And that is the highest possible meditative attainment in the sphere of serenity meditation or samadhi. But I have to emphasize again and again that all of these states of the jhanas and the formless attainments, from the Buddha standpoint, are considered mundane attainments. They are not yet states of enlightenment, not yet states of realization through wisdom, not states which inevitably lead to liberation. If one doesn't go further, achievement of those states and mastery of them will generate the kind of karma that leads to rebirth in the corresponding plane of existence. That is, each of the four jhanas has a corresponding plane of existence. And so if one masters the first jhana, one can, without going further into the development of wisdom, then that jhana builds up the karmic potential that brings, at death, propels the consciousness to rebirth in the plane of existence corresponding to the first jhana. That's the plane of existence in the form realm or fine material realm. Similarly with the second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. And in each of these realms of existence, the lifespan is increasingly longer and longer and longer until when one gets to the realm of existence corresponding to the base of neither perception nor non-perception, it's said that the lifespan is 84,000 cosmic aeons. A cosmic aeon would be the period like one cosmic aeon, like the Big Bang going on for 34,000 years, then the big collapse, another 34,000 years, so 68,000, I'm sorry, Did I say 1,000? No, billion. Okay, the big expansion, 34 billion years. The big collapse, 34 billion years. So that's, 68 billion years? That's one cosmic aeon. Okay, in the plane of neither perception or non-perception, 84,000 of those, 84,000 times the universe expands, contracts, and so one is dwelling in that realm with utter tranquility, equanimity, peacefulness, but then the 84,000 years comes to an end, the alarm clock goes off, bang, 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 and then drop from that realm, maybe down back into the human realm, and then it's up at 9, driving on the highway to work, or maybe as the kid, having to get registered in kindergarten or preschool, pre-K, and you go through the whole process again and again. Okay, the one other topic I didn't really want to get into details about, but there are, based on the jhanas, after achieving mastery of the 4th jhana, or preferably mastery over all 8 jhanas, one can go on to develop what are called the abhinyas, the direct knowledges or superpowers. So these include, there are said to be 5 mundane superpowers. The first are the types of psychic powers, like having one body. One can create multiple bodies, then bring the multiple bodies all together so that there's only one body. One can go unhindered, walk unhindered through walls and ramparts. One could dive into the earth and come up. One could walk across water. One could fly through the sky, sitting cross-legged like a bird. And it's said that one could even, with one's hand, touch the moon and the sun. So those seem incredible to us, but according to the text described them. The only one that I have personal experience of is flying through the sky with my legs crossed, and that is when I think it's JetBlue, which has quite ample leg room, so every once in a while I like to, if I don't have a neighbor, then I can cross my legs and sit there and fly through the sky and think, wow, now I can go back and tell my friends that I've mastered at least one psychic power. Okay, so that's the first of the psychic powers. The second is the divine ear, through which one could hear the sounds taking place at a great distance, even the sounds, the voices of beings in other realms of existence. The third is the ability to read the minds of others. The fourth is the recollection of one's own previous lives. And the fifth is the divine eye, through which one could see other realms of existence and see beings passing away and taking rebirth in accordance with their karma. Though I mention these powers, I should again issue the word of warning that the purpose for developing the samadhi is not to exercise these psychic powers. If they come, of course one has to make an effort to develop them, but one has to have sufficient maturity in one's development to know that one is going to use them only for beneficial purposes, not to exercise power over others. Okay, so I wanted to reserve the rest of this session for questions. So now we've covered pretty much all of the main topics in the domain of samatha bhavana, the development of serenity. And so if there are any questions, then please. And we have here in the back
Hello, Bande.
Yeah.
So my name is Annie. My question is with reference to the many meditation subject you talked about today, and we hear lots of reference to observing either through the physical eyes or through the mental eye. So my question is, but there's still 4 other external sensual doors, like the hearing, the smelling, the body contact. Why all these subjects are all being observed through eyes, but not the rest of the sensual ways, such as hearing?
I'm not quite sure that I caught the question. Maybe state it again.
Oh, so with all the meditation subject you described today,
Yeah.
a lot of it is through seeing, right? So
Yeah.
observing through your physical eyes
Yeah.
or your mental eye.
Okay.
And my question is, why is there no object to be observed through hearing or bodily contact?
Okay. This is a very, very good question. And this is because it seems that it's the sense of sight that provides, or most readily provides, the basis for gaining what's called the counterpart sign. So this is why one uses the kasina and will lux at the kasina object in order to gain, the image of the counterpart sign. And even when one is doing the breathing, though there's a touch sensation there, but according to the commentarial method, the purpose of the touch sensation is to give rise to the counterpart sign, which again is described as a visual image. Okay, but the other senses come into play with the development of insight meditation. So we're going to bring that up tomorrow and see how, with the practice of insight meditation, then one attends not only to sight, but to whatever is occurring through any of the senses. Because that is the sphere where insight is to be practiced, through all 6 senses. Yes?
Hi.
What is your name again?
Tisha.
You are Tisha, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Tisha from the Bronx. Okay, you just mentioned insight. My question is, when you make a progress from jhana or sensory realms to the fine realms, when you make a progress, is it possible that while the meditator while he was in that state, he apply the insight of the insight, which is a 3 characteristic: impermanence and unsatisfactory and delusion. He applies that 3 characteristic into that stage, the meditative stage, in order for him to abandon that stage so he can move on to the next higher state.
One doesn't use insight to overcome one level of jhana to go on to the next higher level of jhana. But one uses this method of reflection on the drawbacks in the lower level and the benefits or the superior qualities in the higher level in order to motivate the mind to gain the next higher level of jhana. But one can use any of the jhanas as a foundation for developing insight. So instead of progressing from one jhana to the next jhana, one can gain a particular level of jhana, whichever one wishes, and then at that level of jhana, one will emerge and then contemplate its factors as being impermanent, dukkha, and non-self. That we'll take a look at tomorrow, how that is done tomorrow. Yes, Sally?
Hi, thank you, Bodhi, for introducing the jhana and so on. My question is very practical, like a person like me, who is very far away from jhana. Then how could we, guarantee not to turn away from Dhamma in thousands of rebirths? And I know I read in the future, if we reach the knowledge equanimity towards formation, then we won't make sure we go to hell or those places cannot study Dharma. But before that, is there a way that we can guarantee stay in the Dharma?
I think that there's no way that we could absolutely guarantee that we'll never turn away from Dhamma. But what I would say are the factors, there are a number of factors that direct the mind towards the Dhamma, that create, we call, affinity or connection with the Dhamma, so that when we take our next rebirth, our next existence, we are likely, if the Dhamma is available in the world, we're likely to come into contact with the Dhamma.
Can you say that 2 words again? I couldn't understand well. You say...
That word affinity?
Affinity, okay.
It's not infinity. It's affinity. It means a relationship or a connection. I think this is the Chinese yuan, second tone, yuan.
Yuan?
Yeah.
I see.
Okay, so what are these factors that create the connection with the Dhamma? Okay, one is saddha, or faith, in the triple gem, especially as expressed by going for refuge, having a strong sense of refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Another is having right view, that is, having understanding of the basic principles of the Dhamma, like karma and rebirth, the 3 characteristics of existence, conditionality or dependent origination, the 4 noble truths. So having understanding of these principles creates that connection. And of course, that right view, it's refined through extensive knowledge of the Dhamma. And then also by doing deeds, meritorious deeds, and then dedicating the merit to come, one dedicates the merit, may I, whenever possible, come into connection with the Dhamma in my future lives.
I see. So faith can carry life to life. I mean, faith, right view, and those kind of can carry...
Yeah, because faith is one side, but it should be ideally balanced by right view, which is the beginning of wisdom. And then, of course, if one has a strong meditation practice connected with faith and right view, that will, again, through the meditation practice, strengthens the mind so one can make that determination to come into connection with the Dhamma.
I see.
But there's no guarantee, but it's just that these factors increase the probability level.
I know. Even someone who reach what you mentioned, the highest meditation can come to kindergarten. So it's sometimes we forget. So. Thank you.
Okay, I want to see if anybody. Okay, let us take. Are you Ivy? Okay, Ivy. Then, was it Vinaya? Okay. Then Ed. And Doug, is that your name? Okay.
Thank you, Bandai. My question is twofold.
I think that seems that we have to change the batteries of that, I think.
So, eight noble paths, we always emphasize right concentration, but we all know that in Buddhism, the concentration actually is not originated from Buddhism practice. It's originated from maybe other religions in India at that time. So when Buddha emphasized 8 noble paths, right concentration, how is that different from the other concentration or other meditation practice that other religions practice?
Okay, this is a very big question. Okay, first let's take the concentration practices in Buddhism. To a large extent, let us say, to a large extent, the concentration practices are taken out from the mainstream Indian, pre-Buddhist Indian tradition.
Right.
Methods like the Kasina meditations, perhaps even the foulness meditations, and the attainments of the jhanas and the formless meditations seem to have existed before the time of the Buddha. Because if we look in the biography of the Buddha, the suttas that describe his quest for enlightenment, we see that he studied under two earlier meditation masters. One taught him the way to reach the third formless meditation, the base of nothingness. The second teacher taught him how to reach the base of neither perception nor non-perception. And so the Buddha would have taken those methods and brought them into his own system. But there are certain practices which are quite distinctive of Buddhism, I would say. One is the method of Satipatthana, the foundations of mindfulness. So that is a complete system laid out in the Satipatthana Sutta, is quite distinctive of the Buddha's method. And also when we speak about right concentration, though it's defined formally as the 4 jhanas, we have to understand that it's not concentration taken in isolation, but it's concentration which is preceded and guided by right view. And so that's why the Buddha places right view at the beginning of the Noble Eightfold Path. So right view guides the development of all the other factors of the path. So even we have right speech, right action, in name, they're very similar to the ethical observances of other religions or other ethical systems, but they become the right view and right action of the Buddha's path because they're again preceded and guided by right view.
Okay, that makes sense. Can I also ask you, because concentration itself is also subject to impermanence, non-self, and I believe all these. I remember there was a story that one bhikkhu, before he was really sick, and he lost his concentration. And Buddha come to him and said something. I forgot, but my question is really about if we practice concentration, one day when we get really sick and we lost the concentration, what do we rely on to...
In that sutta, the Buddha said that the monk was worried that he's lost his concentration. The Buddha said, don't worry, concentration is not the essence. But then the Buddha taught him insight through impermanence, dukkha, non-self.
Okay. So does that also mean that we have to rely on insight meditation in order to liberate?
Okay. Before we move to the next questions, there's something that... Did I answer, Ivy? Did I answer your questions?
Can I follow up? It's John Wang. When Buddha answered that, I think out of my memory is in Majjhima Nikaya 40 or 39 or 40. I tried to look it up.
No, it's in the Samyutta Nikaya. I believe it's chapter 22. Sutta number 88. I might be wrong. Don't clap.
So Buddha's answer basically means we have to rely on insight meditation or the wisdom developed based on...
Well, both serenity and insight are important. But I think in that case, the monk was worried and anxious because he had fallen away from samadhi. And so, in that case, the Buddha sort of consoled him by saying, don't worry about it, that the samadhi is not the essential thing. But and then the Buddha went on to instruct him in impermanence, suffering, non-self. Okay, now it's Vinaya's turn.
Bhante, you mentioned about the neither perception nor non-perception.
Yeah.
Why did Buddha has to use this kind of phrase? Can we not use like subtle perception?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay, so the translation was like that it has to be like, the Pali translation is, Pali
that
words
is
are like
the
that?
Pali expression that comes down in the text, neva sanyana sanyayatana.
Uh-huh.
It
And
means-
Bhante, is there any example that you can give us, maybe Buddha gave to explain this particular,
So
state?
with that particular state?
Yeah.
There are a couple of examples that come down in the Visuddhimagga. Actually, I have the book with me, but I know them. So, okay, one is the example of, there's an elder monk. No, maybe I'd better look at it. Okay, this is called the simile of the water on the road. So a novice was walking in front of an elder who had set out on a journey. He saw a little water and said, "There is water, Bhante, remove your sandals." Okay, then the elder said, "If there is water, bring me my bathing cloth. I want to bathe." And then the novice said, "There is no water, Bhante." And so, just as it's true that there is water in the sense that there's enough water to get one's feet wet, and there is no water in the sense that there's not enough water for taking a bath, so this perception is not perception, since it is incapable of performing the distinct function of perception, and yet we can't say there is no perception because the perception is present in a subtle residual form.
Thank you, Bhante. That's a beautiful example.
Bhante, I wondered, is a kasina necessary to approach the immaterial attainments, or will some other object do?
Just from what I understand, it's always taught using the kasinas as the means for reaching the formless meditations. Though it seems to me that, there might be other ways to get into the formless meditations, that I can't say. But within the tradition, the meditative tradition, the kasinas are used as the basis for gaining the preliminary jhana that serves as the basis for gaining the immaterial attainments.
Thank you.
Okay, Doug?
Thank you, Bhante. My question is also about kasinas. You mentioned before that in the Nikayas, the kasinas are mentioned relatively infrequently.
Yeah.
And from what I can gather, it seems most people, certainly lay people, are not typically using kasinas as objects. My question is a kasina a suitable object for a lay person to explore, or is energy better suited elsewhere?
Even in the monasteries, kasinas are not used very often. In most of the meditation monasteries, the approach that's used most often is some kind of what we call a body-based meditation, like mindfulness of breathing, or the insight meditation through observance of the rising and falling of the abdomen, or the meditation on the 32 parts of the body. But I know of some monasteries in which there are monks who've practiced the kasina meditation. I've only done a little bit kasina meditation myself, very little. Since when I was doing it, I was thinking, for this, I heard my mother's voice saying, for this you need a PhD in philosophy.
So, but is the kasina then something you would generally not recommend that sort of lay people look into?
I think the kasina meditation should actually be practiced under skillful guidance by one who is very well acquainted with all of the ins and outs of kasina meditation. Because what I've heard, and I don't want to frighten anybody away from the kasina, is that, well, I've heard about this in the case of some meditators, that once they start to develop the kasina, the mind can start projecting sort of images that might be swelling up from the subconscious, projecting them onto the kasina image. So maybe if it's a young monk, the kasina image will start emitting images of like beautiful, enticing girls. If it's maybe an older meditator, even a young one, sometimes out of the kasina image, like frightening appearances might start to emerge. And so one might need skilled advice for dealing with those types of images that emerge from the kasina.
Thank you.
Okay, Simon? Yeah.
Yes, Bande. I want to ask a very practical question.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to practice jhana. I mean, I've been in this field, and I know so many people practice so many years that they still cannot get into the jhana.
Yeah.
So my question is that, what is the minimum stage of the serenity that needed to develop Vipassana? If they can get into from the preliminary stage and also access stage and also the absorption stage to get it, to develop the Vipassana, what's the differences? If we can get into from the different stages, what's the differences?
Okay. I think there's two questions here. Like, what is the minimum stage of samadhi needed to develop insight? Okay, takes that first question. And this I'll deal with more tomorrow, but to go into insight, even any jhana or even access concentration within the samatha system is not necessary. This is in my opinion, and this is according to the tradition of the dry insight meditation, which is mentioned in the Pali commentaries and has been revived on a grand scale in modern times by Mahasi Soyador and his disciples like U Pandita Soyador, U Janaka Soyador. So if one takes the approach of serenity, the vehicle of serenity, then access concentration is sufficient. If one is taking the vehicle of dry insight, then one doesn't even need preliminary access concentration, but one moves directly into the mindful observation, and that will build up what is called the momentary concentration. Okay, so that is the first question. The second question is like, what is the advantage, I think, of proceeding to higher stages of jhana for developing insight? And even though, as I say that the momentary concentration or access concentration is sufficient, but they say that the higher the level of jhana, then the clearer, more powerful, the more concentrated the mind becomes. And so the mind can then penetrate more deeply and more subtly into the nature of phenomena, material and mental phenomena, when one undertakes the development of insight. So in the path of dry insight, the approach can be rather difficult and demanding. It requires a great deal of energy and diligence and exertion in order to constantly and continuously note everything that is happening on each occasion of experience. Whereas it's said that when the mind comes out from the fourth jhana and then one directs the mind to observe phenomena, then the mind is very calm and peaceful, and so one can observe the process of phenomena with a very peaceful and quiescent mind. I know within the other sort of main tradition of meditation that's come down from Burma, the Pa Auk Soyador, he emphasizes developing samadhi even through the level of the fourth jhana, and then, only then, turning to the development of insight. And so it's said that those meditators who use the fourth jhana can discern, excuse me, can discern the mental and material phenomena even down to the level of individual chittas and chaitasikas, momentary states of mind and mental factors, and right down to the level of the very basic material constituents. Okay, Ravi.
Bhante, small question, Bhante. You said that once you attain the jhana, you can go to the fine material sphere. If that happens, would it be more difficult to attain nibbana later? If you're born as a human being?
I say if one is reborn in the fine material sphere.
Yes. Like for instance, you reach the fourth jhana, and then you are born in a fine material sphere. Would that mean that your path to enlightenment will be further away?
I think my understanding is that if one has the strongly, let's say, well-established right view, and one has also developed insight along with the achievement of jhana, though one is born in the fine material sphere, one brings along that right view and those tendencies towards insight, and so one can continue to develop insight even in the Brahma realm. And if you look at the first sermon of the Buddha, or the first discourse, when he turns the wheel of Dhamma, we see the portion not only on the Four Noble Truths, but we also see at the end of the discourse the devas and the different realms of existence, one after another, are said to let out a joyful exclamation that this wheel of the Dhamma has been set in motion by the Buddha in Benares, in the deer park, and that shout of joy goes even right up to the Brahma realm. So apparently the beings in the Brahma realm are also capable of hearing the Dhamma, and presumably if they hear it, they can practice and gain insight. Otherwise, it would be almost self-defeating to develop the jhanas without reaching the paths and fruits. Okay, Allison?
Bhante?
You have to stand up, that's one of them.
Okay. I have a question. This is a simple question. The Anubuddhasati, for what I understand is the quality of a Buddha and the image of Buddha when I'm practicing it. in order for me to progress. But in today's talk, you mentioned about if we use image of a Buddha, you can turn into a kasina meditation. My question is, if you use image of a Buddha as kasina meditation, is it true? Is it kasina meditation, or is it still Buddha sati? It doesn't look like.
The last part I didn't catch.
For me, Buddha sati.
Buddha
anusati. I'm sorry. I always had to think about have a relationship between the quality of a Buddha and image of Buddha. If I only think of an image of Buddha, I don't know whether that is a true.
If you're only focusing on the image of the Buddha.
Yes. That's my question. I think about this, so I want to ask you.
If one is doing the Buddhanusati, giving prominence to the image of the Buddha, as long as one is bearing the qualities in mind along with the image, it's still Buddhanusati. I would say, even if one is visualizing the image of the Buddha, but still preserving the understanding that this is the Buddha, it's still a kind of Buddhanusati, recollection of the Buddha. But what I was speaking about earlier today is beginning with Buddhanusati, with recollection of the Buddha, involving a visualization, one then takes some of the colored section of the visualized Buddha. It could be the yellow skin or golden skin to represent the yellow kasina, the red-brown robe to represent the red kasina, and then one abstracts the color from the Buddha image and just takes the color itself and focuses on that. Then it becomes a kasina. So one is no longer visualizing the Buddha, but rather just visualizing a sphere or a disc, a mentally visualized disc of a particular color.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bhante, this question is with regards to the example that you gave for first jhana and second jhana. The lake and the breeze.
Yeah, don't take examples too literally. But go on.
So I just was wondering, did the example signify that in the first jhana you can have external disturbances?
You can have
external disturbances, versus in the second jhana it will be more internal disturbances. Or did you just were you just trying to say the magnitude of disturbances?
Those aren't external disturbances, but what I'm saying is that in the first jhana, the presence of applied thought and sustained thought are coarse factors, and so relatively you could say that there's some element of disturbance in them. Whereas in the second jhana, they're absent, and so that kind of disturbance that comes from applied and sustained thought is now subsided, it's gone.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe we take one more question, then I think we can go to meditation, because I'm getting tired of thinking.
Thank you, Bandy. Actually, I think this is probably a silly question, because I'm thinking about we are the normal person. I mean, we are lay people, not monastic people. We all try to get to jhana, get to enlightenment. We hope we get somewhere. But in practical way, like if we go to university, we can expect like a 4 year you can get a bachelor degree or something like that. But in this path, practical way, how big effort have to put in to really get something. Because I also remember a sutra, like Anapandika sutra, when Anapindika, when he is a lay people, when she passed away and Sariputta pay a visit to him and teach him something, and then later, and then he talked to Buddha, say, your teaching for lay people can be deeper or something like that. So I'm thinking even in Buddha's day, looks like lay people doesn't really like practice. They do practice like meditation, Vipassana, everything. Or we are too ambitious.
Or too
ambitious.
Too ambitious.
Try to achieve the jhana and achieve. And
this brings up maybe some interesting points. Okay, what we could say in the suttas, in many cases, the Buddha's disciples, lay disciples, reached various levels of the noble attainments. So it's said that there were many, many who became stream enterers, and many who became once returners, fewer who became non-returners. It's said that a lay person who achieves arhatship either goes forth soon after achieving arhatship, according to the tradition, they go forth the same day, or they achieve arhatship just on the verge of death. But there's no account in the canon of a lay person achieving arhatship and then continuing to live on as a lay person. Because I think to live on as a lay person, one has to take care of a household, and that goes against the complete inner renunciation that takes place with the attainment of arhatship. Okay, how did these lay people achieve in such great numbers? How did they achieve stream entry and non-returning and once returning in such great numbers? According to many accounts, it's when the Buddha is giving a discourse, and often it's somebody who comes to the Buddha, who hasn't met the Buddha himself previously, hasn't known the Dhamma previously, but they come to the Buddha, and the Buddha is giving a discourse, and that person hears the Dhamma, and then somehow, especially when the Buddha teaches the Four Noble Truths, then they make that breakthrough and they come out as one who has known the Dhamma, seen the Dhamma, realized the Dhamma. So how is that possible? It's something that I've always wondered about, and I don't have an easy answer to. I could only assume that these people in earlier lives had first fulfilled the required qualities. This is what we call paramis or paramitas, by practicing virtuous qualities over many past lives, having a particular aspiration or vow to realize the truth and the presence of a Buddha, and then being in the presence of the Buddha and hearing the Buddha himself expound the Dhamma, I think will have just a tremendous impact. Because we hear even eminent monks, you hear speak the Dhamma again and again, but no realization. So though we might have famous names, but we don't have that spiritual power or that charisma or that anubhava, that spiritual might that a Buddha has. And the Buddha, when he preaches or teaches, he's able to know the deep underlying tendencies within the mind of the people that he's teaching to. And so he could direct his teaching in such a way that it speaks exactly to their needs, to their inclinations, to their capacities. Okay, so this takes place, relates to the Buddha's time. Today, what I would say for lay people to make the best effort that one can according to one's conditions, and don't expect, that necessarily to be a good practitioner that you have to be achieving the jhanas or stages of insight knowledge. But if one puts in a regular practice, one is building up these potentialities within the mind, which when all of the other conditions come together, will have the capacity to bring the desired results. Is it an urgent question? Yeah.
Sariputta, Moggallana and the others, weren't they enlightened, weren't they? In Buddha's time?
Sariputta, Moggallana?
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah. And also the 499 arahants who assembled plus Ananda 3 months after he did. So there were arahants living during the time of the Buddha.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, okay. I thought you said that they, just before they died, they attained enlightenment? You said,
oh no, what I said is that lay person who achieves arhatship, in the accounts that come in the Pali Canon, if a lay person achieves arhatship, either they immediately request the going forth to become a monastic, or they achieve arhatship just on the verge of death. I'm not referring to the monastic disciples. Okay, I think we can go over now and do our closing period of loving kindness meditation.